Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
A Geek for Fun.
And I'm just Ken.
Just Ken. We're doing it. We're doing a slightly topical, if not 3 weeks late, episode of Geeky Gentlemen, where we discuss or review the Barbie movie. And you might be saying to yourself, why the fuck should I listen to three dudes talk about a movie aimed at women, for women, and by women? And the answer may surprise you. Alfie, of course, will enlighten us with that answer. Alfie?
Well, basically, this movie is actually more about us bros and the power of the patriarchy and how...
And horses.
It's a tragedy, honestly, of how that gets undermined through the course of this film, despite one bro just trying to hang out with his bros and bro out, you know? And we call that canning. When you can with a fellow can, the energy that creates can be scary at first, it can make you feel tinglings in spots you never felt tinglings before. If you push past that point, you'll enter a white oasis of white joy and whiteness all over your face, chest, and chest. So that's a long way of saying, just bear with us, because maybe we can be funny about it.
To be fair,
this is an interesting thing. I thought about, do I know any girls that would actually want to talk about this, or should I ask Haley to see if she wants to come on and talk about this, because she actually, really liked this movie. She actually cried at the end, which was really sweet. During the little sequence where you see, all the women and their daughters and stuff. So that was quite cute. But I was like, you know what? No, we're gonna fucking double down on this. We're gonna do the all male review of Barbie, if nothing else, just for the meme.
to be fair, I hate to be a Barbie hipster over here, but this is also very much a film bro movie. And I've been excited for this goddamn movie since July of 2021, when it was announced that Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach were writing this movie together, and Gerwig was going to direct it. Because the second you hear those two names, you're like, oh, this is about to be one of the greatest movies of all time. Because they are such good writers together specifically, and Gerwig is such a good director in her own right. Because this movie's been in, development hell for years. Tons of people have tried to get a Barbie movie off the ground, everywhere. And from not only did Margot Robbie have to do this for a really long time, but Anne Hathaway was attached at one point, and Scarlett Johansson was at one point, and Amy Schumer was trying to get it made for a little while. So there was a long line of people who were trying to get a Barbie movie made. But it was in Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach where the roots of the excitement for this movie have come from. If you don't know, Noah Baumbach is maybe my favorite screenwriter in all of Hollywood right now. I love Noah Baumbach movies. I think he's just magnificent. And every one of his movies is always just about people talking in rooms and having deep existential conversations about growing old and dying and friendship and family and parents and divorce and stuff. And he's so good at that. And when you would say something like, the guy who brought you Marriage Story is going to bring you the Barbie movie, it instantly is going to start turning heads. So the Barbieheimer thing is real, and this is definitely a movie aimed at women, about women's issues and such. But it is also just got this pedigree attached of this was made by popular, serious independent filmmakers who had an idea for this movie, and it's worth talking about on that own level, because this is the third movie these two have written together. They're partners, and she has been in a number of his movies, but she also co-wrote Frances Ha, which came out like 10 years ago. It's one of the best movies of all time. And then she also co-wrote Mistress America, which she also starred in, and that movie is absolutely wonderful. And then at this point in her career, she's directed Lady Bird, which is one of the best coming-of-age movies of all time, and Little Women, which is one of the best like book adaptations to film ever. So like there is a lot of hype just going into this because Gerwig and Bombeck are known quantities that have a lot to say. And as much as Barbie movie is a movie in a blockbuster style that they had not done before, a lot of the stuff that she's specifically talking about here is stuff that you see in all of their other movies.
Okay. I was struck watching this movie by two thoughts as I walked out of it, which is this isn't necessarily a new thing to do. Movies based on toys have been around for a little bit. I was trying to think of other ones that are like not based on an independent property, not made to sell toys, but a movie based on something that was a toy first and foremost. And so I came up with obviously the Lego Movie, the Transformers franchise,
Masters of the Universe.
Masters of the Universe, and Battleship. And I ran out of
G.I. Joe.
ideas after that. Oh yeah, G.I. Joe, that was on that list too.
Bratz.
Bratz got a movie? What?
Bratz got a movie. This was a while ago.
Okay, we'll see if they
Trolls.
fucking beat Barbie to the box office. Who knew?
Trolls, Care Bear, there's a lot. There's a long line of toy movies.
You came up with more than I could. I did not know about Bratz or Care Bears. Like I know there's like, you know, the film adaptation or like the direct to DVD thing, but I was thinking of like theatrical releases, and I did not know fucking Care Bears or Bratz got a theatrical release film. That's really funny. It's also funny that fucking Bratz beat Barbie to the box office.
Because they were kind of just like discount edgy Barbies, weren't they?
Yeah, they're their own thing. So
I'm surprised
I don't know,
Hot Wheels doesn't have a movie.
Yeah, like really, with all the Fast and Furious films, you might as
Fucking
well.
Gran Turismo's coming out this month. You'd think there'd be a Hot Wheels movie by now.
Yeah. But anyway, so it was just something that was interesting that kind of crossed my head, and you know, I'm obviously like the Lego guy, so I'm gonna have kind of a dog in the fight when I say like this and the Lego Movie are the only two of what we've named or what I can think of that are like on any tier actually, you know, movies that have something to say beyond just isn't this toy cool and fun. And so it was kind of an interesting watch in that regard. But then the second thought that I had, kind of piggybacking off of that, and I did want to make this a point of discussion, was, is there something about this movie that makes it feel like it is 100% for adults first before it has any thought of being something that kids will like? Like, I have no doubt in my mind kids will watch this and kids will enjoy parts of it, but I think most of this movie is geared towards adults and adult sensibilities and thoughts around Barbie as a franchise, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. So that's something I wanted to discuss with this movie. If we don't mind making that one of the things we talk about out the gate.
I definitely do think it is, and I think that's even part of the text of this movie, of how it's presented and how it goes across. Is this isn't necessarily going for the kids who are currently growing up on Barbie. It's about the older women who had grown up on Barbie or had Barbie dolls, or from any points of life, be it from late teens, early 20s, mid 20s, late 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. I think it's more so directly aimed at that audience and as a film about what it means to kind of rediscover that. And I think that's been shown pretty heavily by the distinct kind of reawakening of heavily femme fashion for this movie. Like, when people wanted to go to this movie, a big thing was just posting your Barbie outfits, posting your Barbie ideas. You go shopping at like Target or something, you'll see bright, hot pink, everything. Something that was for a long time, since like the 2010s to now, kind of viewed as like kind of dehumanizing and not feminist, and something that wasn't, something to be moved away from and developing the identity. It's something that's kind of, this movie has re-sparked a community and a shared joy of, oh, I really like your outfit, oh, I really like yours too, and from like all walks of life with women. And that's something where normally there's more criticism, but like no one is criticizing each other's Barbie's outfits. It's like completely joyful self-expression of just that little girl who played with those dolls. So I think that's definitely tied into what Gerwig, I think, was trying to put a pulse on. The fact that this movie's made so much money makes me really think that like that was a very underexplored audience that no one had really quite tapped into yet. The closest people I think had really gotten to it was the first Wonder Woman movie, of having a big blockbuster childhood franchise that's specifically for women who grew up on something, in the same way that the first Spider-Man movie was for the kids who had grown up on Spider-Man, and the kids who like Spider-Man could still watch that film, but the way that film is shot is not for children specifically, with like what is the most entertaining thing about it. That's what the Barbie movie feels to me, or like even the first Christopher Reeve Superman movie, right? It's treating a girl's property with that level of reverence, as if it can be enjoyed on those multiple levels, and it's got a big success like all of those other films had, because no one had done that before, and this is the first time that's been done with a woman's property.
Yeah, and I do find that really interesting, and I tend to agree with that as a good model for making a successful movie, and you know, it's just an interesting expression. But I guess something about it just doesn't quite sit right with me, and in the way that it feels like it's kind of, I don't know if this is the right term, but it feels like it's hijacking something that's for kids and kind of giving it exclusively to adults. Like, you know, I have a daughter and she's very young, but she does like playing with Haley's old Barbie stuff and whatnot. But you know, one thought that like kind of occurred to me watching this movie is there's no way she'd sit through like more than the first 30 minutes of this film. Like the second they leave Barbie Land and come to the real world, it's an interesting plot element. I'm actually quite grateful that they didn't stay in the real world the whole movie, which is what I really thought they were going to do. I really like how much of the movie focused around Barbie Land, or the Kendom, as it should have been. But I just, you know, watching this, I didn't see it as something that would hold a child's attention. It is so, I think, overwhelmingly adult focused, whereas something like Wonder Woman, that you mentioned, I think, or even the original Spider-Man, would definitely, like, I remember I watched the original Spider-Man as a kid. It still held my attention as a kid, even if it wasn't necessarily for me. I know that girls have watched Wonder Woman, and I don't see that film having any issue of holding a child's attention the way that this one did. That just kind of stood out to me as it's almost so heady, so thoughty, that I don't think that it can actually hold a child's attention, which I'm not sure if it's a flaw or a mistake, as much as just something that feels like it's kind of taking away something that's meant for kids and packaging it almost exclusively toward adults.
I'm gonna disagree with you there, because I think your language there is a bit too strong. I don't like saying it's hijacking, because I feel like that is applying a level of nuanced, targeted criticism of this movie that we don't universally talk about or apply to most other movies that do this, that just happen to be more for boys. Batman 89 and Batman Returns are not for kids. People weren't really talking about like Tim Burton's Batman as hijacking Batman away from kids. And part of the reason they didn't, right, was because stuff like Batman is a multimedia blockbuster franchise, and if you can't watch Danny DeVito bite off Christopher Walken's nose, then you can watch Batman the Animated Series. And Barbie's the same way, where, like, if you can't watch Greta Gerwig's existentialist crisis Barbie, then you can definitely watch all of the millions and millions of direct-to-DVD animated Barbie movies. I guess
at the same time, back on you.
Hang on.
Okay.
At the same time, I think there is another element here of none of us, even if we have kids, have the ability to speak to what's going to grab a kid's attention universally. And if your kid you don't see paying attention to the movie, that's fine. That makes sense. But I mean, this movie's been a cultural phenomenon for the 3 weeks it's been out. I've been to the theater multiple times since then to watch other movies, and the line is basically just moms and little kids. And this movie's grossed over $1 billion, and it seems like universally it's a blockbuster movie that kids are able to watch even if they don't get it. And so I feel like on a certain level, even if it's a movie that is aimed at a higher audience, that's aimed at like a PG-13 or up audience, it's being enjoyed by, as the receipts show, children of all ages. And if it's enough to get other Barbie products in the hands of children, which, like, Weird Barbie is getting a doll now, Alan is getting, like, re-released now.
Oh my goodness, that's funny.
Like, there's so much... Part. Yeah, there's so much of, like, the external stuff of Barbie that is meant for kids that is being spawned or fueled by the existence of this movie, in the same way that I think a lot of movies that we make now that are geared towards adults do this. I think there is an issue with other franchises doing this sometimes, where the audience's aim is almost exclusively for adults, where it becomes like a weird feedback loop. Like, I think that's the problem with a lot of Star Wars, where it's really just made for 40-year-old Star Wars fans and not new Star Wars fans. But I don't think Barbie does that. I think Barbie is a movie that's aimed at people who recognize the franchise, but is having a far-reaching universal appeal to all ages and all demographics in a way that we haven't seen a movie do on this level in years, honestly. Like, I can't think of the last time a movie has caused a complete social awakening where the theater is jam-packed for showings at all hours of the day everywhere for 3 weeks straight. Like, I literally can't think of the last time a movie has done that, except maybe Endgame. But the difference between this and Endgame is that this is not a movie that, like, broke its opening weekend.
12 years to build up to, and yeah.
It didn't take 12 years to build up to, but it's also, the box office tracking on this is nuts, because week one, it made double what its highest estimates were for. And week two, it made more than its highest estimates for week one. So, like, by week two, when it should have had at least like a 40% drop-off, it still made more money than it was projected to make opening weekend before it came out, which is insane. That almost never happens. And that's partly
true.
because it's attracting a wide range of audiences, which includes a lot of kids.
I mean, I'm sure it does, and I guess my point is more, or I guess not my initial point, but my worry is more that is that return on investment, is that coming back to the theater to watch it again and again, is that driven by an adult audience, or is it driven by kids wanting to watch it again and again? And it very well might be. And, you know, even if kids don't get it, they can still enjoy it just because of the name recognition, right? It's just something that, like, occurred to me while watching it. I don't really know how valid the argument is. What I was going to say a little bit earlier when you brought up the Batman Returns example is that movie very specifically got a lot of complaints for being too adult. But, you know, that's kind of neither here nor there. If the box office speaks for itself, if the word of mouth is so good, and the kids that are going to see it are actually enjoying it and aren't getting, like, bored halfway through because it's not really what they hoped it'd be, then that's all well and good. It's just, that is a thought that kind of occurred to me right around the time I was laughing my ass off at Depression Barbie. It was kind of the scene that kind of got me, like, you know, I know that it shouldn't have taken me this long to realize, but this really isn't for kids at all now, is it? Like, by that point of the movie, I'm like, ooh, that's maybe this is a bit of a problem that we're showing kids depression Barbie. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Again, it's a very millennial and Gen Zer joke. I think I don't think you would get a joke like that in a movie, 20 years ago or whatever. But it was quite a laugh riot. I wonder how the hell they got that one past Mattel. Like honestly, the Mattel boardroom and the jokes about we had a woman CEO in the 90s and another one at some point, and that's just too like all of those jokes I was kind of surprised that Mattel let pass, but I was like, okay. The depression Barbie was what I did not expect to make it through to the final audience thing. But I don't know, maybe just they trusted the filmmakers enough, and it certainly paid off. It's fucking brilliant. Can't wait to go see the Barbie cinematic universe. Can't wait till we get the fucking Skipper spin-off movie and the Sugar Daddy Ken and the fuck out else. I had to look up some of those because again, it's very it is very reminiscent of, I guess not the Lego movie specifically, but like the Lego Batman movie. It's like, you've had to have made up some of those Batman villains. No, they're all real. Probably worth a Google. I was like, Jesus Christ, they actually made a fucking Skipper doll that grew boobs, and they actually made a fucking Sugar Daddy Ken. Okay. I wasn't prepared. I thought it was legit just a joke, and then I'm like, oh no, there it is. Okay. We're doing this.
Yeah, it's so meta about all that stuff, and I love how it just like breaks the fourth wall multiple times, especially with the narrator just kind of like bask in awe of how weird some of those choices are. The fact that the one Barbie in the movie that isn't real, Weird Barbie, is now becoming an actual Barbie just makes it even better.
Well, I mean, again, that was a joke I quite liked because, again, that's something that, every kid has that memory of that toy that they just fucking destroyed. Or every adult has that memory of the toy they just destroyed as a kid. And so that one felt very real. Like, again, I'm going to keep bringing it up because these two movies are intrinsically linked in my head as the only good toy movies. Which is, there's a very similar, like, niche. If you did this, if you played with this toy growing up, you remember this thing. And that was the Lego movie where he's, like, going through the collection of rarities, and he's got, like, the cloth of Bandide and all these other, like, random shit that just ends up in your Lego pile as a kid. So, again, very, very reminiscent of just that if you played with this as a kid, you'll remember doing this, or you'll remember this happening at some point. And that's just, and I had friends that were girls as kids, and I remember seeing some of those Barbies got pretty fucking wrecked. What's that joke at the end of Toy Story 2 where the prospector ends up in the girl's backpack? It's like, oh, you're gonna love Emily. She's an artist. And just fucking drawn over Barbie face. So that's a pretty common thing to happen to Barbies, even if it wasn't necessarily encouraged by the company.
The thing I think about that though, that is kind of like, we can maybe talk about this later on, but I think it's like something that's little getting lost by this movie, which is a shame, and it's just the nature of like whenever someone does something truly like groundbreaking for the first time, the first instance is for the companies to try and monetize that as quickly and as hard as they can. I saw a pretty succinct tweet about that, like the announcement that they were making those weird Barbies thing. It was just like that's not something that can be bought, that has to be made, that's something that like you can't get that from a toy box. That is something that like a child's very specific shared experience, or just something we all did. That's not something you can really manufacture, and I think this movie does a really good job of specifically picking up on your shared experiences and shared universal truths between guys and women of like what it feels like in certain situations, and some of the funniest jokes are just those things that hit on. They're vague enough for like everyone has their own version of it, but you get intentionally like, oh, this is what everyone has this moment in their lives that they've seen, or this friend they know that does this or that kind of thing. And I think that's a really personal, really true experience that's cool, and when it's channeled into something you can put on the screen and you make into a film with the right script and the right actors, it can be something really special. And that's kind of why I think so many people had an emotional reaction to this. Like Aaron cried during this film as well, not at the montage at the end, but during the speech that the mother character has, where she just goes off on kind of how fucking hard it is to be a woman and stuff like that, and like it was really well done. And I think having a place for those grievances to be aired is really special. And what I worry is the success of this film, as with many movies that are big breakout successes while still having indie filmmaker sensibilities, is that a lot of the lessons will just be taken and commercialized. And I think The Weird Barbie is like a really good example of that, of like taking something like, oh, I remember doing that, and then putting it in a box and selling it, which is just really funny because that's what the movie's talking about. So like stuff like that I think is interesting, of like how we relate to those experiences.
Well, and that's
Haley,
why.
oh, sorry. Can I jump in
Yeah,
real quick?
go
This is
ahead.
pretty fast. Haley wanted to go buy the new Barbie that's out as stereotypical Barbie from the movie kind of thing, and she went to the store. It's like fucking $40. Like, that's too much for a Barbie. So they're really fucking milking this, because Haley didn't buy that one, but some fucking parents did. Of course, the other thing is, as soon as the fucking first trailer dropped for this movie, Barbie sales went through the fucking roof, to the point where it was a good thing that we bought Leah Christmas presents when we did, because you couldn't buy a Barbie after this trailer dropped, which was shortly before her birthday, or shortly before Christmas or birthday or whatever it was. So it's kind of nutso how wildly successful this movie is, that critiques certain elements about not necessarily Barbie as a brand, but Mattel as a company and the way it markets and kind of uses the toys, and kind of takes those and runs with it, and Mattel just kind of blindly like, yeah, sure, whatever, we're fucking printing money right now. Don't give a shit. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
I don't know. You're good. You're good. Speaking to that point, although real quick, not only did this movie's trailer cause an uptick in sales of Barbie, but the production of this movie caused a nationwide shortage of the color pink because of the specific pink they were using to paint everything, which is just ridiculous. I love that. But no, and going back to what you guys were saying though a second ago, I think that's also why. To go back to my earlier point too, why people had faith in this movie from the beginning when they said Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach were the ones involved here, because you can't manufacture something like this. You can't just say Barbie was really good, so now let's make a Mattel cinematic universe. You can't just artificially create a rivalry like Barbenheimer. It has to be organic, and it has to stem from a lot of different groups coming at one thing for different reasons, and that's where the joy of the whole event was. Where there were people that were excited for Oppenheimer, there were people that were excited from the history side to the IMAX side to the Nolan side to the meme side, in the same way that there were little girls excited for Barbie, parents excited for Barbie, film people excited for Barbie, and meme people excited for Barbie. So like, you're converging all of these different audiences to organically create an event that paid off in spades, where both movies are doing way better than I think either would have them done individually. And bringing it back to
Oppenheimer WB as well.
No, that was Universal. That was a big thing. The reason Barbie released on the same day as Oppenheimer is to fuck over Christopher Nolan.
Oh. Well,
yeah.
I mean, it didn't quite work because that's a pretty successful fucking movie too, huh?
Yeah, Nolan had that really dumb statement in 2020 about like how he doesn't want movies to be released on streaming and he wants people to go to the theaters, which, does not age well. It was a bad thing to say at the time. But essentially, their decision to do that caused a rift between Warner Brothers and Nolan, so he left them. And so Universal decided to release Oppenheimer for him instead. And so to screw over Nolan, and Warner Brothers timed test screenings and review screenings of Barbie and the release date on the same day as Oppenheimer, so that people would have to force to choose between them. So Warner Brothers almost kind of hoping for like, look, if we're going down, you're going down with us, and instead they both did better than either one of them would have done independently.
That's so funny.
But the Greta Gerwig and Bombeck of it all is, I think, where this movie really succeeds, where you don't have to say, and a lot of people have been saying this since, because Gerwig's doing a Narnia movie next, you don't have to say that
Yeah, I can see it.
people who are successful indie artists are selling out when they do intellectual property stuff, because they're not. At the end of the day, making a blockbuster movie is a really powerful tool because you can reach a wide audience with complicated ideas, and if you do it well, you can get a lot of people thinking about complicated things, maybe in slightly more simplistic terms, but more than you would have otherwise. And so it's not like Bombeck and Gerwig were like completely independent prior to this, right? They were raising in prominence for a long time. But having two artists that had a point of view, that had something to say, and hiring Gerwig as a director who has a very specific voice and her own sensibilities and her own interests to make her movie her way is part of why this works. Barbie as a movie wouldn't work if it was just selling the Barbie dolls as Mattel wants it to, but it works because it's a movie in its own right. It's a movie about questions that Gerwig finds interesting. It's a movie in conversation with her other movies. It's a movie that has parallels and allegories to things that she is specifically interested in that go far beyond just selling Barbie dolls. Like there's a whole fucking like Catholic Paradise Lost metaphor built into this movie with Barbie Land, right? It's not a particularly subtle movie in that way, but that's kind of where its power is, where you want a blockbuster movie to be able to do that. You want it to say a lot of things to a lot of people, and even if it's not like the most nuanced possible take you could do, you're getting into more people's hands. And the fact that we do that with all other franchises, and we so rarely do it with properties targeted specifically at women, but also from female directors, is why this movie is so monumental in its own right. You're not going to get that with like a fucking Polly Pocket movie.
Okay, but when's the Polly Pocket movie coming out?
You know, it's a good question.
I need the Polly Pocket movie and a fucking, I don't know, movie about Pol Pot to come out on the same fucking day. Like, who's someone that's killed a lot of people?
I mean, like, who expected, right, in 2023 to get a Barbie movie that ends with a 2001: A Space Odyssey reference, right? It's kind of insane.
No, it ends with her going to see her gynecologist.
This is true. This is true.
That was such a good fucking joke. Such a good joke to end on. Like, honestly. I really did appreciate that, no lie, in the theater, of how you go from, like, this really heartfelt thing of, like, life is hard, you'll die, you'll get old, you'll experience pain and loss, and then it just ends with, I'm here to see my gynecologist. It was such a I love a good joke like that, where you could have a movie that's, you know, equal mixes comedy and drama, and just go super hard at the end, and it's like, okay, it's gonna have a really thought-provoking ending, but then just not undermine, but just undercut it all with a fucking joke is so good to me. That's a certain particular kind of vibe you don't get very often. So I really appreciated that.
Oh yeah, 100%. I feel like it nails the ratio between like being about something serious and dark, and also just like filtering in as many jokes as possible into frame. We're talking around the movie a lot, but like to get to some more specific stuff. Margot Robbie is an incredible actress. I love her. I feel like we don't give her enough credit over the course of all the movies she's done where she proves she's a great actress, like Babylon from last year, or I, Tonya, or like anything that isn't Harley Quinn, even though she's good in Harley Quinn as well.
I really was a fan of her physical acting in this, particularly in that like beginning sequence. The bit that like everyone kind of focused on the shoe gag where she's like permanently high heeled or whatever. I really liked when she went down the slide, which I know is like a very like specific thing. It's just like one shot, but like she's just posed and bent so perfectly, like a Barbie doll as she goes down that slide. I was really impressed by that because it's such a small detail, but she just pulls it off so perfectly.
She's got like that perfect stiffness where like you can she's supposed to be a character that is being moved by invisible hands, moving her into position. So like she has to be really stiff, but she doesn't look stiff doing it. It's just like that perfect balance of like she's literally just waiting for the magical air to carry her down into her car or slide down the slide, and like pantomime drinking tea and eating toast. It's so well done, and it's so subtle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
For
all of those little touches I thought was super impressive. The fact that they just the set design of Barbie Land is amazing. Like that is such a cool like world to build and to go that intricate with the stickers in the fridge for like what the food is, and the fact that there's no water in Barbie Land. They had to like paint the floor in a very specific way to make it look like that. So they say like every time they were on set and like someone would walk over it, there was like an initial like because they thought it was actually water because of how well they painted it, and it was like, oh wait, no, okay, they're fine. Everything's like that. The bit with Ken and when they're in the running joke with the car, but like anything like is hit, it is like a child is like picking it up and like twisting it in the air and then like bringing it down. Like just how the physics of the world work, stuff like that. Just is such a meeting the premise with sincerity and like showing the fun of like I said, that shared experience that you can immediately relate to it because you've all done it, and it's a very specific like way of, even with like you haven't played with Barbie, just we're playing with action figures, like that just base idea of play is something that I think isn't talked about a lot as like a something you kind of lose when you get older, and like kind of making the movie be about like reigniting that part of yourself and letting yourself be that kind of silliness and having that joy again, I think is really cool. And it only works because the movie makes such a good argument for it, of this as fun and this as a cool place where like this is just genuinely like it's the best take on Paradise Island in film. Like it's the best like it's the best take on just like, yeah, this is just a society where the men are kind of superfluous and the women are like completely in charge of everything. And really, like Marston would have loved this movie. He would have gone fucking crazy for it.
Yeah, something that's really interesting about like that part of it thematically is the movie is doing a lot of work in terms of like even-handedly explaining like what patriarchy is in terms of the real world in Barbie Land and how that is created by the Barbie doll, because the opening scene is really smart about drawing that comparison to 2001: A Space Odyssey, where Barbie is the monolith that changes everyone's perspective and they go from baby dolls to Barbie dolls. And like in theory, the idea is supposed to be like we've indoctrinated little girls to only play with baby dolls because they're supposed to grow up and be mothers. But we're shattering that and giving them Barbie instead because Barbie can be anything. And that has the unintended immediate consequence of creating an image of a woman that isn't necessarily accurate for most people's experience of it. And so Barbie gets put in this weird limbo spot of like, is it feminist to play with Barbie or not? And that kind of debate's been going on for decades. And the movie comes out and says that at the end of the day, Barbie is living in a world all its own. That addressing whether or not Barbie is feminist or not does not in any equal proportion change our world. There are two different things. But Barbie can be anything. And how you choose to play with Barbie and how you utilize Barbie as a tool in your own relationships can change the world. It's not up to Barbie because Barbie's just the idea. It's about the people instead. And Margot Robbie embodying that performance of a doll coming to realize her own mortality, having that scene where like she cries
I
and for the
think
first
about
time.
death.
Right. Having that scene where like she cries and realizes she's crying for the first time, and then towards the end, like the bit of the movie that got me the most emotional was when she's talking to her creator at the end, where she's basically talking to God, and she's like, I don't want to be an idea anymore, I want to be a person. And that kind of turn I really love, and I feel like the movie's really smart about that. On the opposite end, but equally intellectually, Ryan Gosling is a national treasure, and I love him so much. Ryan Gosling is the greatest thing about this movie, and I love him.
Alfie, the virgin. Oh, it's the best Wonder Woman movie ever. Ian, the Chad, it's the best Pinocchio movie ever. Sorry, I had to. No, but fucking yes, I was waiting for when we talk about Ken, which
Oh my god,
like it's
yes.
such a okay. So this was my takeaway from this movie, which is in all the marketing and all like the memeing about this movie as it was coming out. I thought Ken was going to be a funny joke character, like purely just the comic relief character throughout the whole movie. Like I saw the one bit in the trailer where he's like, "Ah, there's a doctor," and I was like, "That's a little weird. I don't know what that vibe's all about." But then to find out that Ken becomes the antagonist of the movie, that it's not Will Ferrell like I thought it was gonna be when he shows up. Like that is such a fucking rug out from under me kind of moment, and the fact that like this is still 100% the Barbie movie, but if there is a secondary character, there's a really strong argument that it's Ken because gets a pretty big arc throughout the movie, like maybe even more so than the human characters that come to Barbie Land, like the mother and daughter. Like they get an arc, but they are what I would consider, not background characters. What's the word I want?
Secondary?
Characters, yeah.
Yeah, like they're there to help move the story along. They're important to the story, but they are not anywhere near the focus. Their arc is present, but it's not as big a focus as Barbie and Ken's arcs in this film.
No, Ken is
which
absolutely like the co-protagonist in this movie, I feel like.
I did not expect in the slightest. I was like co-protagonist slash antagonist of the film. I did not expect that at all going into it. So I was really, really impressed that they managed to like fucking pull the rug out from under me as hard as they did.
And this is where like this being a group of guys talking about the Barbie movie is, I think, warranted, because I think this movie does something that very few movies get a chance to do properly and even-handedly, because there's all of this like right-wing bullshit about this movie being anti-men, and it's not. It's probably the most inclusive of men's place in feminism of any like actual blockbuster movie to have come out in the last 20 years. This, and you're gonna be shocked when I say this, but I think it's true. This reminds me a lot of Don John, where Ken's arc in this is he discovers patriarchy, but the thematic underline here is that Ken's entire relationship is defined by his relationship to Barbie. Like, the movie opens with that great line from Helen Mirren where she's like, Barbie has a great day every day, Ken only has a great day if Barbie looks at him. And so the idea that patriarchy stems in this specific instance from men's insecurities and needing a way to find a self-affirming masculine identity where you feel comfortable and enjoy yourself as your own person instead of just in your relationship to other people is really, really important. And I think the movie does a really good job of like making Ken not only just the bad guy, but rooting what he's doing in something that is real and true and accurate. Because at the end of the day, right, when you look at all the right-wing movements that are turning men and specifically young men against feminism, it's people like Jordan Peterson. It's people that say things that speak specifically to insecure, alienated kids, guys who don't feel like they belong, who are then getting talked up by right-wing extremists to hate feminism to blame them for their own insecurity. And the only way to combat that is to speak to men on that same level and say that, look, you're insecure, and that's understandable, and that's not your fault necessarily. That is also patriarchy. Living in a society that necessitates the oppression of one gender by another is always foundational to creating a sense of anxiety and insecurity, even in someone that claims to be dominant. And your way away from that is to find your own self-worth, not in blaming someone else for your problem. And Ken learning to do that is really, really good to do in a fucking blockbuster movie that comes out over the summer. Like, this is absolutely a message all young kids should be watching.
Yeah, no, I'm completely on board with that, and I think Ken and how Ryan Gosling plays him is just phenomenal. Like, that is, I remember when he first got cast, a lot of people were really against that casting because he was older and he wasn't specifically like I guess like the Zac Efron type you almost imagine for Ken. But like, oh my god, if anyone has universally proved that wrong by just how hard it is to nail that level of, because it's not just like he's a jokey character or that he's a dumb character, is that he just lives in his own universe and believes in it so fundamentally that I want Ryan Gosling just. I think he like Heath Ledgered with this Joker with this day when like he went
100%
so.
did.
You know, Robert Pattinson made that joke, like, no one ever methods acts as a nice guy. Well, like, that finally someone has, where, like, Ryan Gosling went so deep into what it would be like as Ken to the point where he talks about, like, what convinced him to get the role, where he saw the Ken doll just, like, face in the mud while they were playing with Barbies. He was like, this guy's story needs to be told. Because, like, this guy... Because there's just this profound sadness to, like... Go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say, like, Ryan Gosling's a great actor, my favorite. Get him in all these serious dark noirs like Only God Forgives and Drive and Blade Runner, but people forget that the dude is fucking great at comedy, like movies like The Nice Guys, and this is, like, not even hyperbole. This is one of the best performances of any movie in this year, because it's so physical, it's so sincere, it's so magnetic. It's one of those things where, like, when Ryan Gosling's on screen, you can feel in the theater that every person is just driven to watch him. Like, it's truly a really embodied performance on a level that you would not have expected from Ryan Gosling playing fucking Ken. And if there's any, like, criticism of the other Kens in this movie, is that really none of them feel like they pop as much as he does.
That's again like such a hard bar to.
I mean, you're talking about one of the fucking best actors in Hollywood, and like trying to compete with that. That actually brings up kind of something I was thinking about, and I think the filmmakers ultimately made a good decision, but it was something that entered my head as I was watching this, of like possibly an alternate route they could have gone down, and I'm just kind of curious to get your guys' thoughts on it. Do you think that? Well, I don't think that Margot and Ryan Gosling should have played every version of Barbie and Ken. I am maybe a little curious as to whether or not they should have been doing a lot of like digital double work to have just a lot of them on screen. You have like your certain versions that are, like when you have like the race swapped characters or whatever. Or not race swap, that's not the right word. Characters of different races portrayed. I think that's fine. But, Barbie being the woman that does everything usually is, when you look at the actual toy, just the single mold and it's a new outfit, right? And, like, that's kind of from the business production standpoint, that's one of the beautiful things about the toy is you're not making 17,000 different Barbie dolls. It's just the one doll a lot of the time, and then you're making all the different outfits. So it's a streamlined production line. So I was maybe a little surprised that they didn't do literally any of that. Margot never digital doubles, or at least I don't think I ever see Margot play more than just stereotypical Barbie. You don't see Ryan Gosling play anything else besides Beach Ken.
They do it with one Barbie. They do it with Mermaid Barbie.
Oh, it is Margot in that one?
No. It's not Margot Robbie. It's Dua Lipa. But you do see her played out multiple. Like there's scenes where there are multiple Mermaid Barbies, and they're all Dua Lipa.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's just that was something that I entered my head really early on in the movie, where you start to see Barbie Land. I'm like, oh, okay, so they're not having Margot play like every Barbie or even multiple Barbies. And I was like, I don't know if that would have been a good choice or not. But it was something that kind of stuck out to me as, they went that direction.
The thing for me why I think that works, and I think it's something they realized, because I imagine that was something they probably pitched and probably talked about. They specifically casted someone to try and get that effect, which is Emma McKay. Is they talk about that she is often she was one of the people who was in the running for Lois Lane for the James Gunn Superman movie, and she's often confused with Margot Robbie a lot, as people say that she's like a dead ringer for Margot Robbie, and so she was cast specifically because they were like, all right, we're just going to have you in the same outfit, I'm going to give you a blonde wig, and we're just going to have you be just like Margot Robbie. And when they tried that, like, you don't actually look that much like Margot Robbie, and like, this is actually not quite as funny as we wanted it to be. I think the direction they went for instead was more so letting each Barbie be more so a representation for like one person in the audience, and then Margot Robbie being almost like the prime Barbie, you know, kind of like the idea of having that all consolidated in one figure that you can root for, and you're staying focused on that entire time. I think it reminds me a lot of, because this is something we've talked about a lot, just off recording, is like this movie is very Grant Morrison, and I think that is a take where like if you ever do these multiversal stories with like a billion of a Superman or stuff, or the same thing as even with like the Into the Spider-Verse movies, I think it really does help that although we know in those movies that there's other Peters, there's only one Peter that we know who wears the default plain classic Spider-Man suit with no frills or whistles to it. Everyone else has like a adjustment to it or a different art style change, and if there isn't one, it's like a really far background one. It's like a quick 2-second like gag kind of thing, and that's the same in comics and stuff. And I think that can really help build a, when you're interrogating the concept, then you let it just be represented by one single figure as, I'm not just Barbie, I'm the Grant Morrison Barbie who has been through all of it. All of those different dolls you're talking about that are that specific model with that specific blonde hair, that is all this one person. I do think makes it a more interesting character to say like that's not separated out, that's not diluted out, that is just everything this one Barbie is thinking and feeling is all of those, and everyone else are the variants, and everyone else are the things. And it's not the only take, but I think they were the right choice for doing, because I think it made the movie better, and it let Margot Robbie give like a better performance, kind of having that history behind her. Like, she's not a new model, she's literally the first, she's the daughter kind of thing. And I think it makes the whole arc work a lot better when you can't imagine like, well, were there an older Barbie before her that was just Margot Robbie in a different outfit? It's like, no, it was Margot Robbie in that outfit as well. She just changed with the time. She had an Adam West era, you know, kind of. She lived she lived through it all, like, you know. So I think that's a better.
It was kind of cool seeing Margot Robbie get to be like the first Barbie in the 2001 scene. Because like that Barbie was Haley's thing growing up, and so I've kind of learned a lot about them, you know, kind of vicariously through her. And, you know, she was very much excited by the movie as we were driving home. She's like rattling off all these details, and like one of the gifts that I've bought Haley in the past for like Christmas or her birthday or something, it's been several years, was not an original but a reproduction that that Mattel released of the original release Barbie in the black and white swimsuit. So it was kind of cool just to see Margot get to do that. And again, I tend to agree with you, Alfie. I do think you get a stronger performance out of what was done. I don't know if it necessarily would have affected the core performance, but like you get a more identification with that main character Barbie, with the audience, between that character and the audience, by just having Margot play the one character. But I don't know, it's just something that like kind of passed through my head as I was watching it.
Sure, and like I said, I think it's definitely something they thought about as well. Probably, like I don't think you're off the money. I think it was something that like, well, maybe this could have worked. Maybe this could have been a fun acting challenge, but they just decided otherwise. But I think
Yeah.
it is definitely something that was probably at like when she was probably cast, she was probably like, oh, I can do all these different versions. Like it probably came up a lot.
Yeah, it was just interesting to watch in that regard. And then, you know, again, same thing for Ken, with Ryan Gosling as Ken, was just a really, you know, kind of surreal experience to see. Oh, this is like a subtle thing, but it's just, and I guess the problem is that it was noticeable, because Get Better Hollywood. It's kind of weird to see the Asian male actor playing one of the other versions of Ken be kind of like, not the leading man, but be actual competition and not just like a joke.
Yeah,
for
be the
leading
dick
man.
Ken.
Yeah,
I love that.
That was kind of surprising. You normally wouldn't see that. Like, Hollywood's still got a real problem with Asian actors and like doing a lot of stereotypical casting and like never letting them be the male lead or let them be any kind of like threat, in a masculine sense. And so to have that be done with Asian Ken, I was, you know, pleasantly surprised by. And it, again, with Gerwig being, such an auteur director, I have to imagine that was pretty intentional because you had a lot of other very himbo energy guys sharing the screen, but there was a lot of focus put onto the Asian male lead there.
Yeah, and it's
So I thought
it's
that was kind of
Simo
cool.
it's Simo Lau who plays Shang-Chi, and like there is definitely this consistent overcorrection we do where historically we have this problem of like we didn't think of Hollywood didn't want to present Asian men as attractive in their own right, and then there was always like stereotypical racist portrayals portraying them of ugly, bucktooth, fanged, etc. And then we've kind of turned away on the other side where now every time we do something like that, they're always like really good, kind people, but they're always like fish out of water stories. They're always like the point of view character. Shang-Chi has this in spades too, where like the way you're introduced to the first Asian superhero in the MCU is like he's just like all of us. He doesn't know what's going on either. And to be honest, I think he as an actor is much better suited to playing someone that is smug and kind of like a tough guy, you know? Like if you go back to those first couple of Fast and Furious movies where like the bad guys in the early 2000s are always like really built, jacked Asian Yakuza dudes, you know? Like, as stereotypical as some of the writing in those days can be, that kind of role doesn't really exist for Asian actors as much anymore. Because I think maybe people are too worried about like feeding into the stereotypes. But you get an actor like this who's got like natural charisma and just kind of has a smug energy, and you kind of lean into it. You make him the smug Ken, and it completely works.
All I'm
I'm
saying
gonna
is
beat you off so hard.
Oh
right
my
now.
god, that's so funny. I'll
Same.
beat both of you off right now.
Simu for Vegeta.
I can dig it. I can dig it.
The dance scene with the Kens when they start doing the Grease reference.
Oh
and
my goodness! What a
so-
fucking number.
So good, so good. Ryan Gosling
Anywhere
cannot be
else
topped.
I'd be a 10.
Is it my destiny to live and die a life of blonde fragility? It's so fucking good. But Simu does like the hair flip and his hair sparkles, and I fucking love that.
It's good stuff. I still think my favorite Ken line in this whole fucking movie is right at the beginning, and it was in all the trailers too. Just well, I'm your boyfriend, so shouldn't I like stay the night? Well, what would we do? I have no idea.
My absolute favorite Ken bit is when Barbie is starting their plan and like she's going to go pretend to be Ken's girlfriend, and Ken is surprised, so he's like, "Excuse me for a minute." Then he walks inside, you don't see anything, and then he just yells "Sublime!" and then walks out. It's so good.
Steve, you should just start doing that.
I
Like, can we
should.
just make that a thing? Just whatever we're having. Sublime!
I bought a tie-dye I'm Ken enough shirt, and I've been wearing it around.
Good. I'm glad. That's very Steve Baxi energy right there.
Going full tilt on the Kenergy. I love the Kens in this movie. I do have problems with this movie. I don't know if we want to talk about things that don't work as well, but I do have criticisms.
Oh, no, definitely. Like, please, I can't wait for Steve Baxi to get canceled. Because I started the review with problems. Now we're an hour in. Now no one's watching anymore, so I'll get all the negative comments. And Steve, you could just let your rampant misogyny fly right now. Go ahead.
So I don't like Will Ferrell. I don't think Will Ferrell is bad. I think part of the problem with Will Ferrell in this movie is he's almost too much like winking at the camera when he's introduced here. And I think the Mattel exec roles, the way they're introduced is really funny. A lot of their dialogue is really funny throughout. The fucking like Pac-Man style run through the offices is really cute. But the movie has this weird problem where by the last stretch of it, when the Kens are at war in Barbie Land, the script kind of loses track of all the characters who are not Barbie and Ken. And so like the Mattel guys go to Barbie Land, and then they just kind of do nothing, and then they're just there at the end to wrap up the fact that they were there, but they they're not really adding anything to the movie by that point.
Yeah, they really could have just not known how to get to Barbie Land, and the movie would have probably been better for it.
Exactly. And I think part of the other problem there is because you have to juggle the fact that they exist but aren't doing anything, you also don't have enough time devoted to the relationship between America Ferrera as Gloria and her daughter. Because Greta Gerwig is really, really interested in mother-daughter stories, and she does that in her writing a lot. And she just recently became a mother too, so like a lot of these ideas are fresh in her head. And so like you have this relationship with America Ferrera and her daughter that is essentially the impetus for the whole movie. But I really feel like those two reconciling gets truncated way too much by the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I like the choice that her mother like admitting to the contradictions of what it's like to be a woman and really feel those things is what endears her daughter to her. But I feel like there's not enough time actually spent on here is this kid's perspective on her relationship to her mother and her perspective evolving in terms of working with the Barbies. Because one thing I will disagree with what we talked about earlier is I don't think this movie does enough in terms of getting at a kid's appreciation of toys and play the way the Lego movie does. I think it's a movie that is very much about the mom and the Barbies, and I think that's good. But if the daughter is going to show up in the movie and lob this really, really sharp criticism at Barbie herself of everything she represents, I feel like they never actually go into detail in terms of like, well, what does this kid consider play to be? What is this kid's new appreciation for Barbie? Is it all still a vehicle through her mother? Is she going to go back to the real world and start like playing Barbies with her now? Is there something
That's a
that
really
they've evolved?
interesting way to say, Ian, you were right. And I'm sorry. That's a
No.
really interesting way to say that, Steve.
I still disagree with you because I don't think it's hijacking it from specifically the kid character doesn't feel like she's doing anything in the movie. I feel like she starts in an interesting place and then she's just bonded with her mother and nothing happens there. And what that bonding looks like never takes shape in the movie.
I'm just gonna sit on my high horse. That's what I'm gonna do right now.
This is a completely different criticism that you said.
Feels really similar.
No, because you were criticizing the movie being too geared towards an adult audience and not for a kiddie audience. I'm not talking about a kid audience. I'm talking about what the movie is saying about kids in the movie. Those are different things. No, those are totally different things. These are literally different criticisms.
No.
I have no issue with who it's aimed at. I'm talking about how the inside itself.
No. I hear what you're saying. Here's my completely valid and unimpeachable argument. No.
But those are my big things. Is I feel like by the end, the Barbie and Ken stuff takes center stage because that's really what the whole movie is about. But they have too much other stuff going on that they're not able to wrap all those other elements up as neatly.
Yeah, you could have really just left the Mattel guys on the beach and just dealing with all the weird shit that's coming out of the Barbie world because of the Kendom. And it probably would have been a little bit better serviced for it. I do really like the mother-daughter relationship. And again, I'm very surprised by how many fucking plot twists this movie has. And they all legitimately kind of stun the pants off me. And you get like well, you've got to go to this world and, heal this relationship with the child that's playing with you. And I'm like, okay, that's a pretty, believable way to set up the premise of this. I can buy it. And then you kind of see like the kid's having trouble. Maybe like a parent, maybe like her father died or something, or she's dealing with grief and death for the first time, and she's kind of retreated back to Barbie, and she doesn't really know how to handle the emotions. Maybe that's where it's going. And then to just find out, like, I fucking hate Barbie. I haven't touched Barbie since I was 5. And then it's hey, so I started playing with the Barbies that we used to play with when you were a kid. Was such a fucking good moment. And it is a little disappointing that thread, it's not that it doesn't get resolved, but it does get kind of truncated down in the service of some other stuff where I think you could have saved some time. It is funny, again, that the Lego movie keeps coming up, and I swear I'm trying not to, but it is very, very funny to me that Will Ferrell is in both of those.
I think that's part of why I don't like him here. Is I feel like he's already kind of done this up again.
But
It just
better.
kind. Yeah, he's done here, but better. But like he shows up again, and it just feels like it's repeating a joke too much. But then also the
And-
Lego Movie handles the kid and the dad playing with each other and bonding over that as like an actual beat to rest on for a minute that I don't think this movie does, and it needed it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It almost feels like his casting and inclusion, because he's playing it not exactly the same role, but a similar role as like the executive character and stuff. It almost seems like it was done as kind of like that executive mandate of, oh, you gotta do what the Lego Movie did, get Will Ferrell back, and like basically just write him more or less the same. And you know, Will Ferrell's an actor that has two modes. He can do tightly scripted content, and he can actually do a really good job with it. I think that's what you see in like the Lego Movie, where he's not doing much ad lib, and Stranger Than Fiction is another similar film where it's pretty much right on script because there just isn't a lot of Will Ferrell-esque comedy. This one, I feel like the flaw may be that they let him ad lib too much, and I always get the feeling that Will Ferrell's a very fun guy on set. I like his movies where he just kind of... Will Ferrell's like creator-owned, directed, and written movies. All basically work with the same premise where they just start the camera rolling, they start the scene, they know where they have to get to, and then the actors just sit there and try to make each other laugh while staying in character. And until someone breaks, and then they, you know, do that scene 3-4 times, then cut it up and make it work on screen. And so I feel like he's probably a really fun guy to have on set, and that they kind of just maybe let him go off and do his own thing a little too much, and just kind of couldn't reconcile what to do with all the footage that they had of him. Or that's at least the vibe I got. I've got absolutely nothing to back that up, but that's kind of the impression that was left on me with Will Ferrell in this one.
Yeah, I bet you there are some like deleted scenes here and there of just like Will Ferrell being really funny, which are fine. But you're right, I feel like you have movies like the Lego Movie, you have movies like Elf, where Will Ferrell is still bringing a lot of comedy to the role, but there is a story there that has to be told in a proper sequence, that has a heart to it, that has an arc for its characters, that is different from him just shooting a bunch of skits that are then being reorganized into a movie like Anchorman style. Anchorman's a great time. I love Anchorman. But this movie needed less Anchorman and it needed more Elf.
Mm-hmm. Or just less Will Ferrell. Again,
Or just less Will Ferrell, yeah.
You really could have put anyone in this role, and it probably would have worked out a little bit better. But that's kind of neither here nor there. Alfie, you've been quiet. You say something.
No, I was just basically agreeing.
No, you say something. You bring up a point.
Okay.
You contribute, damn you.
I agree with the Will Ferrell comment and the daughter. I think those are probably the once we head into that final after the third act is where a little bit of the pacing kind of takes a little bit of a dive. Not too bad, but like maybe 3-4 minutes where it's just like, yeah, we could have sped this up. We could have resolved these things a little cleaner and kept, because the rest of the movie is just such a boom, 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 beat after beat after beat. It's like straight banger. You don't notice anything like that. Once we move past that point, after the big climax is where we feel like there's a little lull near the end. Something I really liked, just talking about performances, is probably my favorite scene in the movie. Is Margot Robbie's scene when she's on the bench and she looks across and she kind of just sees the world for the first time, and then she turns to the old woman. And like, this is something that I've seen done in a lot of stories with these kind of figures before, where like an immortal or ageless figure will see the old as beautiful and stuff. But it's kind of a trope. But this is probably the most effective use I've seen of it, simply on the back of how she delivers the line, where it just feels so genuine, where it just feels so like believable. That of course Barbie finds that beautiful, because Barbie is like the complete something Barbie could never achieve, something Barbie could never be. And then the kind of just coy response from the old lady, she's like, oh, I knew, yeah, I got it, don't worry, I'm killing it. Like I think all of that stuff was was really, really powerful and kind of like Garvin spoken that like that's the soul of the movie for her. It was just she did the movie, she could do that scene, and I kind of think that is the scene of the movie for me. About like we talk about a lot in these series we do reviews about like the power of certain icons, and I'll talk about Superman, what like he means and what's the point of these ideas and stuff. And prior to this, I think it was just I was always kind of in that bubble with just boys material, just boys concepts, and even Wonder Woman is a character that appears in boys comics. Like it is something that isn't exclusive to those, but it's heavily marketed at it. But just seeing that reaction and seeing my wife's reaction to this movie, it gave me like a real appreciation for like that's not Barbie has that power too. There is, even though she's a toy and even though it's a casualized, there is something there worth digging into with that concept of the woman who could be anything, right? Like the idea of that's her pitch, right? If that's the Superman fucking lifting the machinery and the sun and the end of All Star, right? Like that perfect panel encapsulating like the idea of that character. It's kind of what that is for Barbie. Is just this idea of potential, of the infinite potential of when you're a kid and you can imagine any world and any situation. You could do anything you set your mind to. And I think that's really, really strong. And I respect this movie a lot for also taking the time to critique that and to critique how that can have a very damaging effect of if you can be anything and then you fail to be those things, and how that can be really hurtful and you can grow resentful to that, and then how to grow past it by still, like, even when you feel like you've hit the dead end and you can't achieve anything else and you are just this forever and you don't think you can be good enough, there are still ways you can still transform yourself, you can still be anything. That's why the ending of this movie I think really works a lot as well, with Barbie getting to be the one thing she thought she couldn't be. So all of that stuff I think is just phenomenal, and I think Garwig on an underrated level has like that snappy understanding of dialogue and how to shoot dialogue scenes and the quick pace between them. Where this is something when I've been able to watch a lot more of her films where that's something I really appreciate it, where it's not a like flashy cinematography, but it's so like competent and it's so just like every shot is the perfect shot. We're just not going to make a big deal about it, kind of thing. And I really respect that a lot. Well, this is a really pretty movie, but it's not a flashy movie. There's not like huge filters over it or heavy contrast. You could go a lot more surrealist with Barbie, but specifically going with making everything look like a children's plastic toy that we're filming, I think is a really super smart choice. And so all of that just works phenomenally for me and brings it together. Those flaws I had, I was like, nah, not so much on. It doesn't override it for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gerwig coming from a background where she is literally just in movies and writing movies and co-writing movies where it's just people in rooms talking really lends itself to this idea of like, let's minimize how much you really need to do in terms of like the actors and the camera and really just focus on impact.
When am I gonna get a Gerwig Star Trek movie? God damn it!
She said that her next thing is like a 2-part adaptation of Narnia for Netflix because she was a really big Narnia fan, and she was also raised Catholic and has a lot of like religious overtones in a lot of her other stuff, including this movie too. So like it feels like if anyone's gonna be a good fit for Narnia, it's gonna be her. And she really wants to make the transition into making like these kinds of big blockbuster movies instead of just like the smaller scale relationship movies that Bombeck does. So I'm interested to see where she goes with that. I feel like she'd be a really good fit for Star Trek. I am gonna miss her though, just randomly showing up in movies like Mistress America and Frances Ha, but that's okay. Let her have her career. Let her be the biggest female director of all time. I'm here for it.
Yeah, I quite liked her takes and just the dialogue in this is, really good. It doesn't get into like that Nolan-esque territory where I feel like ever since Dark Knight, a lot of the characters just end up fully discussing the ideas of the movie, and it kind of starts to stop sounding like things actual people would say. It sounds like, well, unless you're Steve Baxi, but it's it starts to sound like people reading, fucking essays as opposed to having conversations. And I think this movie does a good job of getting across a lot of those ideas while still having very naturalistic dialogue. And so I was pretty impressed by that aspect of it.
I think the Ken song too is like a really good example of. It's so fun to listen to. It's so catchy, but it's also just like the heart and soul of what that character's arc is, and it's kind of great. And it does the beautiful musical thing of like the character arc is carried out in the song, so like they're at each other's throats to begin with, and then they go through the song, and then they're all holding hand in hand, and they're all just Ken. It's so good.
It is pretty fucking great.
One of my...
I will say one thing I'm a little disappointed by, just because it seemed like it was going to be a really funny joke, but they kind of undermined it with Alan beating the shit out of all the construction worker Kens.
Oh, that's so funny.
And like literally throwing punches. Like that was a funny scene, don't get me wrong, but then when you have like all of the Kens going to war on the beach, I was a little disappointed that, like, because it was very intentional that they were all doing, like, really goofy, like, things where they're never actually throwing a punch. They were just, like, noogieing each other or flashing their biceps or whatever. I was really hoping that we'd just get to a moment where one Ken punched another and they go, oh, man, that really hurts. Don't do that. But I kind of like subverted the chance for that joke because Alan just fucking went ham on everybody. So it's like you're kind of trading one joke for another, but I don't know, something about the other one, just the potential of it entered my head. I'm like, oh no, they can't do that because they already had Alan beat the shit out of everyone. I'm like, feels like a missed opportunity. I think the other joke would have played better, but maybe that's just me being selfish.
Michael Cera does kind of kill it in like the few minutes he's in this movie. He's so fucking funny.
If I have to sit on another fucking leather couch.
Oh, I really like this movie. It's not my favorite movie of the year. I don't think it's Gerwig's best or anything, but I do feel like there's a lot of really, really good here, and I think it's important from a cultural standpoint and just an artistic standpoint of how much they're able to accomplish in this kind of movie. So definitely kudos for that. It does kind of get weirdly truncated in the last few minutes, to its detriment in certain spots, but otherwise I think this is a really good movie.
I tend to agree. I thought I had a really, really good time watching it. I was kind of like listening back as I was editing last week. I didn't want to make it sound like I didn't want to watch this movie. It's just, being a parent and having to get the time to go see a movie is complicated. So I was like, it just doesn't really feel like it's for me. I don't really necessarily want to watch it. Haley was like making a deal out of like, oh, maybe I'll go with my mom or your mom or something. So I was thinking that she wanted to do it as like a girl's experience. So I didn't want to give the impression that I didn't want to watch the movie or I wasn't interested. This was going to be one of those ones I think I was more waiting for, streaming to watch. But just like listening back to that episode, I kind of came off the wrong way. Not really how I meant to. But it was a really good time, even though it was, again, not a movie that felt like it was directly geared for me, especially in its marketing. But, in watching it, especially the conclusion, I was really impressed by what it did have to say about not only women and their interests, but men and their place in feminist world as well. So it was pretty impressive. Do we have anything else we wanted to talk about with this one, or can we wrap up?
I'm good to wrap up. I said to Steve as well, an Oppenheimer thing. I don't know if we have time for that though.
I do really want to. I did want to mention real quick and just like talk about the whole Barbenheimer thing and just contrast that experience because I did end up doing both movies.
Okay, well in that case, I need to pause the episode and go take a shit. So
Okay.
We're gonna do that real quick. Sorry.
I was saying when you left, I'm like, you probably could have just went to take a shit, left us talking, and I would still be talking by the time you got back.
Yeah, I know, but I wanted to actually hear this, so there's that too. And what am I gonna fucking do? Listen to the episode once it's finished, like a fucking crazy person? Who the fuck watches Geeky Gentleman?
I said that as well, and I'm sorry if I was going on too long-winded, but I didn't know.
No, you're all good. I was just like, I'm kind of getting a little like I could probably make it. I think we're about done. And then she's like, I want to talk about Oppenheimer. I'm like, this is gonna be like 20 fucking minutes. So here we are.
I'll be quicker than that. I'll be quicker than that. I
All
hope.
right, timer started. We're at 1:24
All right.
recording. So let's see if this
All
ends
right.
by 1:54 or some shit.
So the thing we mentioned before was Oppenheimer and Barbie came out in the same day in part because Warner Brothers wanted to screw over Christopher Nolan because of him leaving the studio over the pandemic releases. So like the preview screenings for critics for both movies took place at the same time. Their early reviews basically came out like days after each other, and then they did eventually get released at the same time, essentially like a game of chicken where no one wanted to be the one to move. But it ended up working out for both of them because both movies ended up doing way more than they would have independently. And the fact that all of these people created the Barbenheimer hashtag and bought tickets to watch them both at the same time created this huge wave of anticipation for both of them that you just kind of can't do organically, or you can't really like manufacture anymore. But a part of the reason that both people were excited for both is that Greta Gerwig is a known quantity and has made lots of really good movies. So her take on Barbie is speaking to a specific audience in the same way that Christopher Nolan is, right? Like the people who like and watch Christopher Nolan movies do have an overlap with Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig. So like there are a lot of people that like both of these people, and we're excited to see both of these people have movies come out the same time in the same point of the year. So that feeds into a bit of it. But I think what was most surprising is both movies are actually really similar because they are both ultimately about mortality and the consequences of our ideas and the responsibilities that those take, and they're filled with all of these really great secondary actor performances. I saw Barbie Thursday night on the 20th, and then I saw Oppenheimer the next morning. I'm really, really glad I did not watch them back to back, and I'm really glad I did Barbie first and Oppenheimer second, because I would not have been able to watch Barbie after Oppenheimer. It would have just been irreconcilable. There's no way that this much pink would have in any way resonated with me after I watched Oppenheimer. It would not have clicked at all.
See, I wanted to do the double feature so bad, though, just for the meme, man.
And so many people did, and like it's cool in that way. I think Oppenheimer is a better movie. I think it's just way, way more tight, both in a screenplay sense, but also it's just doing so much more from like a directing and a visual standpoint, where it's really trying to be more experimental and innovative, and it's doing stuff with sound and light that you just don't see other movies even like getting close to attempting. So it's undisputedly the champion, in my opinion, of between the competition. But I feel like it was actually a nice little strike of fate that they both came out at the same time, because everything about Barbie's existential crisis, about like thinking about dying, and leading naturally into the concept of a guy who created the weapon that could kill us all, is really, really cool on its own level, because they both end up just talking about these two sad protagonists trying to deal with the trajectory of their life. That said, though, I'll end off just by saying I love this meme where someone was like, Oppenheimer could never be an astronaut, physicist, mermaid, but Barbie could build the bomb.
Dude, just the amount of like stuff that the meme, because you know how it is, there's like the trending topic, and so everyone fucking tries to capitalize on it, especially on YouTube. And just the number of YouTube videos for Barbenheimer that came out are so fucking good. One of the art channels I follow, Insert Art, did like a just art challenge with just the idea of Barbenheimer. There wasn't like any other prompt besides that. And the fucking image was so great of Barbie pressing the button all like cheerful, and Ken just like sitting back, leaning up against something, looking all cool, and the fucking mushroom cloud in the background. It's such a good, like, that should have been the poster for the double feature of Barbenheimer right there. And then the fucking like,
I showed you the shirt I got for the premiere, right?
No, I don't think so.
So I bought a T-shirt for the premiere that I watched that I wore to both screenings. And when Barbie's character posters came out, they were like all of the actors and actresses playing Kens and Barbies, except they would like say like the actor and like what their Ken or Barbie is. So like this Barbie's a mermaid, this Ken's beach, this Ken is tourist, this Barbie is president or whatever. So I got a Barbie shirt where it was a picture of Oppenheimer in that Barbie pose, and it just said, "This Ken has become death, destroyer of worlds."
Hashtag.
It's so good. It's like my favorite shirt.
That's pretty fucking good. Yeah, the other like really good Barbenheimer video I saw is a guy took like a glass bell jar and he made a mushroom cloud inside of it, crafted it with fucking like pillow filling and stuff, and put lights in it, and he made it pink. It's just so fucking good. Taking the existential horror of the bomb and then just applying Barbie aesthetic to it is just on a fundamental level just works, and there's something so like again millennial about it because it's just the generation that grew up after the Cold War, so like the ever-present threat of death from above which just wasn't there.
Right. I mean, like all of us were from like 7 to 14 years old. Watched 3,000 people die in 9/11 on TV, and our for the rest of our life.
Yep. So I don't know, just it was something else. I got a real kick out of that one. The Barbenheimer meme, like I'm trying to think of other moments in internet history that compare to it, and the only other one that comes to mind is like the storming of Area 51. You know?
Oh yeah, Naruto run on Area 51.
That was like the memes for that were so good. And we're just we need to make a meme movement like that isn't so specifically timed to just it will come and go in a moment of time. We need something that'll last forever like this because it's so fucking good.
Dude, though, like these movies have brought back theaters in a way I haven't seen. Because like Oppenheimer tickets are sold out. We're sold out literally for like a whole 3-week run on IMAX. They extended it and it got sold out, and they extended it again and they're basically sold out now. Both of these movies, like people are watching them to sold out screenings from like 9 o'clock in the morning till 2 a.m. at night, every theater in the area. It's insane. Like every show I look up for Oppenheimer is basically sold out. Same with Barbie.
That's awesome. I had no trouble getting tickets, but you know, Fort Wayne. There's a lot of people that watch Fox News.
There's a difference.
So, yeah. Haley and I had a great time though. I went and got the tickets the day before just because I knew that the movie had been such a fucking runaway success that I didn't want to risk it. So that was fine, and also we went out to Outback Steakhouse for dinner because I have one of those in town, and I was like, I don't know, I've just been vibing Australia lately, I guess, and I keep seeing the fucking Outback Steakhouse, and I'm like, you know what? Fuck it, let's go. So we had a lovely night of it. It was a really fun time. And a really good movie. I really, really like this one. Alright, is that it? Are we done?
Yeah, I'm good with that if everyone else is.
Okay.
Sweet.
I don't see any fucking point of giving a rating. Like, we had minimal complaints about this, and even the ones we did have aren't really much to do with the movie itself. It's like Will Ferrell and maybe the mom and daughter could have gotten a little more focus, is I think the only complaint about the movie of it in and of itself. So they're 5s all around probably. Alright, so we need something to do for next week. Does anyone have anything they're just dying to talk about right off the top of their head? Or is it my turn? Whose turn is it?
What was the last thing? You did Spider-Man and horror.
So yeah,
it's Alfie's turn.
It would be mine.
Pick something bad.
Let's make something bad.
Yeah, pick something you just want to fucking lay into. We haven't done that in a while. It's fun.
Something bad that I've seen. Something I want to talk about.
You don't have to. I'm just suggesting things.
Yeah. I'm just trying to, because that would be fun. I'm just trying to think of something. I don't particularly know. I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am the champion of the oppressed.
And I'm just Ken.
Anywhere else, he'd be a 10. You're 10 to me. You're 10 to me, Steve.
I love that when he says that line, he has to count 10 on his fingers.
Yep. Anyway, everyone, thanks so much. Until next time. Or no, I already did that part. We are your Geeky Gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.
Sweet.